Oh my word. Oscar Piastri just put the F1 world on notice officially. What an amazing race in Baku. A firecracker of a race, and 2024 continues to deliver for all of us. All right, so Shez will be back tomorrow, but I thought a rapid reaction from the race, from an amazing race in Baku, is well warranted. And there are at least a couple of storylines, but we have to start at the top with what Oscar Piastri just did. He started P2, overtook Charles right after the pit stops, the first set of pit stops and the only set of pit stops in the end, and really pitched the stoutest defense I have seen in recent memory. I mean, for 30 odd laps, he and Charles went back to back to back, and at one point it seemed like Charles would get past him. That kind of never really happened. And then in the end, really Charles kind of overdrove his Ferrari and lost his rear tires. And in the end couldn't really catch up on him. But what a drive by Oscar, really putting himself smack dead in the middle of this championship battle. And although he will probably not catch Max for the championship this year, I think this was one of those races where you kind of see championship pedigree. He did all the right things. He drove an amazing race, and his back and forth with Charles was just simply amazing. And by the way, shout out to Charles. As you guys know, I have a Ferrari bias. And while I wanted Charles to win, even I would come off and say, look, the better guy won today. And so was Oscar. He just simply was better than Charles in every single way. He pitched the defense that he needed to. He probably took inspiration from the Leclerc book, right? Going back to Monza and seeing what happened there. And kudos to McLaren for undercutting Ferrari and what seemed like a decent gap that Ferrari had built, Leclerc had built with 6 seconds at the pit stop. They probably, in hindsight, overestimated the advantage there. And, once Oscar put in a stout in-lap and out-lap really on both sides of the pit stop, he really positioned himself to cut into that gap and be within DRS range in no time. And then Ferrari struggled with their hard tires, and it was pretty evident at the beginning that Leclerc was still going to need some time to find his footing. I can't really blame Ferrari for that. This was probably a slight miscalculation, if anything, but in the end, there's nothing that can be taken away from Oscar. He has really asserted himself as a force to be reckoned with. When this drive, I believe, is a signature drive. It's one of those drives that we associate with folks that we think are going to be champions. And Oscar Piastri, just 18 months into his F1 career, does this. So Shez and I will break down a little bit of that tomorrow. We'll go back and forth. We have a couple of things in the mix already. I do think, though, that the storyline still in this race is Lando Norris. Now, I know it's not the fancy story. It's not the sexy story to talk about. But from where Lando started, roughly 17th on the grid, to make his way all the way through the field, he drove a brilliant race, and most importantly, he made up ground on Max. Now, I know what all of you are going to say. Yes, he needed a little more than 8 points to make that gap on Max in order to kind of beat him in the championship towards the end of the season. And he only managed to pull a 4-point lead on Max, which is not significant. But given what happened yesterday in qualifying, there's not much that they could have done. And given how far back he was starting, this was quite the amazing race. For him to finish ahead of Max goes to show you that the McLaren had pace. I'm sure McLaren, while they're celebrating Piastri's win, are probably also kicking themselves a little bit because Lando could have presumably finished second. And the reality is that the McLaren was the quicker car today on Sunday. And that simply will kind of come to haunt them a little bit. But all in all, I also believe that a drive like this can do a lot in terms of boosting a driver's confidence. I think Lando can be really proud of himself, given where he started again. It was total damage limitation. I suppose if you had asked anyone before the race whether he would have a chance of finishing ahead of Max, we probably would have said no, but he managed to do the unthinkable in some ways. So I really believe firmly, squarely, that he's still in the mix, although he was not able to make the kind of gap that he probably wanted to this weekend. He did finish ahead of Max, and that is no small feat. We also are going to talk eventually about the Leclerc, the Carlos and the Checo crash, which was quite amazing. There's already been a lot of back and forth on social media on whose fault it was. Now, honestly, I would say as a Ferrari fan, I would have hoped that didn't happen because Ferrari had the chance to get 2 podium positions there. And it's pretty clear that Carlos was going to manage to get ahead of Perez. And maybe, if anything, given how if we had the chance to see those last 3 laps play out fully, Leclerc would have been in trouble and probably finished outside of the podium. But kind of an unfortunate incident for both of them because both Carlos and Checo were having a brilliant race. Checo, for one, was having an amazing race. He was going to end up on the podium. Having a chance to be on the podium was just quite amazing given how his form has been of late. And on a weekend where Max was nowhere, he was the lead Red Bull driver that kind of went in there. Now, I've seen a lot of back and forth. A lot of pundits have said, one way or another. But I think in the end, if you're being fair, in my opinion, this was more of a 50-50. I think Carlos wanted to try to get the slipstream from Leclerc and probably veered just ever so slightly to his left. And Checo was maintaining his line, but also trying to go for that slipstream. Carlos was ahead, by the way, so I suppose you could put some blame on Perez if you wanted to, but really, in my opinion, that's just an unfortunate race incident. And really, you could go 50-50 on that. And I know many of you are going to disagree, and I think this is, again, one of those classic, what is your vantage point? What's your lens on this kind of a thing? But in the end, it's kind of unfortunate for both Perez because he was having such a great weekend. I also feel bad for Ferrari because they could have made some valuable ground on Red Bull today and could have also kind of placed themselves in the mix with McLaren. They've kind of fallen behind McLaren, even though they have made some gap to Red Bull. So very interesting race indeed. Shout out to the Williams drivers for both scoring points. And Franco Colapinto, man, quite amazing. He would have finished 10th, I believe, without Carlos and Checo crashing, but good God, what a race by him. And he's already outscored Logan Sargent in a span of just 2 races, which is just amazing. And goes to show you the bad decision, really, that Williams made going back to earlier this year. Shez and I will come back tomorrow and take a deep dive. But in the meantime, let us know what was your greatest story from this weekend. What questions do you have for us that we can answer for you? It's been quite the amazing race. And we've been saying this race on and on and on coming from Miami. And who knows what the rest of 2024 has to deliver for us, but it's been delivering quite well. So we look forward to catching with you tomorrow. In the meantime, please give us a like, please subscribe, please comment, please do subscribe. We know that many of you are watching us, about 80% of you are watching us. Hit that subscribe button and help us get to 1,000 subs if you can, please. We'll talk to you soon. Later.